All right. Welcome on in to another episode with Hodler Ranch of Bitcoin Tech and Wealth. There's been a lot of chatter on X recently about a lot of these companies, these Bitcoin treasuries. A lot of the love has shifted away and it's gone to the market makers have really seriously rewarded the Bitcoin miners that have gotten into the AI and more specifically the HPC play, co-location deals. You see Iron making huge runs. You now see CleanSpark coming out of a 5-year consolidation pattern. You've got just pretty much across the board, any of these miners that are, there's such a high demand right now for the compute power, and they have it all set up. So you have companies, the largest companies out there that are demanding the energy, and they have to turn to, because it takes so long to set these things up, they have to turn to the mining companies for their compute. So it's been a great ride lately for them. However, it wasn't always that way. A year ago in the mining community, the chatter was similar to what we're feeling right now in the Bitcoin Treasury space, to where everything was negative. Felt like total capitulation was in. The community had very little membership actively speaking and posting valuable information. So like all that signal and alpha went away for the most part. And now it's like in an all-time high, obviously, with the prices we see on the stocks like Iron. So on the Bitcoin treasuries, again, capital shifts, and I fully expect it to shift again when no one knows for certain. But now is the time to be looking at where these opportunities lie. So yesterday I put out a post on, there is so much information, and I want to give you a fraction of it here without overloading, because there is just an incredible amount, and figuring out how many shares and how many pipe shares and warrants and everything else of the like that a company has is, to put it mildly, a very challenging task. And so I have got to the point where a lot of this is automated, but if certain things change, I do have to manually update these. So I've updated it this morning. And let's just kind of take a look. We'll take a step back at, I've got this sorted right now from the lowest MNAV to the highest. So you can see strategies down here as the 22nd ranked company right now with a 1.4. Saquon's is what looks on the surface to be the best value, right? Because it's the lowest MNAV. But again, this is why I created this dashboard, because it's so important to look at all the things they have. Do they have levers? Do they have prefs, right? And so until they get to that fifth lever to have preferred stock, they're kind of stuck, right? And they got to work through all these pipe shares. So I've got recommendations based on that. Anyway, I've got over 45 metrics for each of these companies. But just from a definition standpoint of the MNAV, there's a lot of confusion. So again, on my site, on BitcoinWealthEdge.com, you can see all this, and you can reach out to me for a copy of this spreadsheet that you can sort and filter. When we look at MNAV, and again, I'm taking just what strategy and other companies are doing, the leaders in the industry. They're taking the enterprise value divided by the total value of what the Bitcoin they hold on their balance sheet happens to be. Okay, so how do we go about that? Because even that is in and of itself a calculation, right? And so if we're looking at a company like Saquon, first of all, we got to figure out how many shares they have. Then we've got the share price coming in from Google Finance. That's not a problem, which we can multiply that and get our market cap. Then to get our enterprise value, we need to take our market cap, okay, and then we need to add column Y, which is the debt, okay, and then subtract out column W, which is the cash on hand. Finding all of these is very challenging, especially for companies. Let me repeat this. Finding this information is very challenging, especially for companies that don't have a dashboard. And we only have about 10 companies with a honest-to-goodness dashboard, if that. Right? So we've got strategy here. Their MNAV at 1.4. We have their debt total here. Right? So we can see that. We have their outstanding shares. We don't have their cash on hand, so we have to back into that number when I'm calculating this. Okay? We look at the next company on here. We look at Metaplanet. Again, we have some of the information, not all of it. We have their Bitcoin holdings. We do have their shares outstanding at 1.14 billion. We have an MNAV of 0.91. So, how do I get to match Metaplanet, for instance? So, Metaplanet, their enterprise value is around 3.1 billion. In order to get to that number, we need to know, obviously, how many shares they have, and that's the easiest. But then we also have to know asset total, and how do we get asset total? We take column W, which is cash, plus column R, which is the value of the Bitcoin itself, that NAV. We add those together, right? And then when we're doing enterprise value, again, we talked about the debt. We need to know the debt, and if we don't see the debt clearly on a site, which is the problem we continuously run into, then we have to back into that number. So if their debt, if they say their debt is, we don't know because they don't say it, right? So if they say their MNAV is 0.91, and I have in here that their debt is $10 million, watch what that does here to the MNAV in column S. So that lowers it, right? So it's kind of a trial and error to get that to match up based on the numbers that they're giving us, okay? Or we can adjust the cash. Watch, if I take cash from everything that they have available to them, and we lower that from 350 down to 200, say, just arbitrarily, that moves their MNAV up to a 0.95, right? So you can see how these things impact it. It is very difficult to constantly track this, and I'm doing the best I can to do this because the reality is I don't know that anybody's going into this level of detail and pulling up each and every dashboard to make sure that everything's matching. So again, Semler gives us their MNAV of 0.8. They give us the debt of 120. So I can come in here and I can look at Semler, right? We can come across here and we can say, all right, got the debt of 120. We have again the assets. We take the cash plus the Bitcoin NAV. We can get that fairly easily. But again, we don't know exactly how much cash they have. So if I adjust that number, that's going to adjust the MNAV, obviously, as I just showed you before. So this is a constant moving target. These companies are constantly doing things, whether it's issuing shares, buying to buy Bitcoin, whether they're looking at convertible notes, whether they're looking at warrants, whether it was a pipe deal. All those things are playing in the background, so it is very difficult to know. And then you have to say, okay, do they have any cash left on hand? Do they what is their debt level? And then I'm taking that, and I'm, by the way, trying to calculate the leverage, because leverage is important too. The more levered the company is, now we don't want to see it too high, but the more levered it is, assuming it's less than 50%, if it's right around that sweet spot of 30% or so, like Saylor talks about getting to, then that should move that MNAV higher. That should move that stock price higher because you're now introducing leverage. So when Bitcoin moves up, and it works both ways, when Bitcoin's going down, that's going to go down. But when we see the next move up in Bitcoin here in the next week or so, we all expect that to happen here pretty soon. Global liquidity continues to expand, right? As that happens, we should see these levered plays move up. And again, I could, sort this all by levered as well. But I wanted to just kind of show you this. I mean, I keep track of this all the time. I have a folder just for the Bitcoin Treasury companies here. But then you take a company like Strive. If you go to their investor relations, they don't have a dashboard yet. There's nothing that we can do. So the best thing we can do is come in here and take a guess. And again, I'm using Grok and ChatGPT to go in with deep conversations on how many shares they may have outstanding, what deals are in play, all that stuff. So am I confident that Strive is a 0.83? No, I'm not. But I don't know that anybody has any of this information. In fact, when I talked to David Bailey on X, he wasn't even sure how many shares were outstanding. So calculating Nakamoto was tough. And yeah, it's nice that Nakamoto built a dashboard, but what is it? I mean, it's got, we invested some in Metaplanet, we invested in Treasury and Kindly MD from acquiring, but we don't have, other than the MNAV, we don't have a lot of the secret sauce here. So we don't know exactly how that number is how they're getting at that. So I have to come in and I have to back into that number, all right, which impacts everything else. So in order to do that, I had to do the best estimate at what the debt level was, what assets they have, so on and so forth, in cash, okay? So that's where we're at with these MNAVs. Again, this is not and even if these MNAVs were perfectly aligned and perfectly correct, it's still just market sentiment, so it still doesn't mean it's a good buy, but it is a starting point for the conversation, so it is good. So instead of just saying, oh, these, the MNAVs are all off, this sucks, this is all FUD, I would challenge you to take a closer look, because this is what I do all day with these companies, is take a look at this. And it only gets worse the less information that they put out there, which is why it's so important that they have a full transparent dashboard. I'm not going to recommend a company, and I'm not going to put their overall risk as low, right, if they don't even have a transparent dashboard out there for us to see. So I hope that makes sense. Again, please like and subscribe. BitcoinWealthEdge.com, at Hodler Ranch on X. Thanks again. Hopefully this answered some of the questions, and hopefully this gives you a good jumping off point of how these MNAVs are derived and where we're sitting currently at today, with today being Thursday, October 16th, 2025. Thanks again for joining. Appreciate all of you.